is that in the end, we'll each have our own reality. I have my reality, you have your reality. What objective truth says is that there's one you, there's one reality. And truth for me and truth for you are bound to that same reality. And if that's not the case, if we each have our own truth, and therefore we each have our own reality, the consequence of that is that ultimately communication itself becomes impossible. If our words don't have some kind of fixed meaning, then communication becomes impossible. And in fact, we each live in our own worlds, isolated in our own world, not even really able to communicate. In the classical understanding, there's reality. And reality is the measure of truth for me, and the very same reality is the measure of truth for you.
I got beats in my walls, in my halls, the music calls. Rhymes are knocking at my door, I feel vibrations through the floor. Songs are screaming, set me free, but I'm too wrapped up in everything. I'm thinking in notes and I speak harmony, and my muscles move in symphony. I'm in a spell and I can't help but lose myself. I'm in a spell and I can't help but lose myself. Tripped on my tongue, foot in my mouth. Someone's home, but the lights are out. Wow, wow. Tripped on my tongue, foot in my mouth. Someone's home, but the lights are out. In a jail, I've made myself the only key's a mystery. A hope for freedom's taking shape, but indecision bars escape. Climb my way out tooth and nail. The state of mind I find won't fail. Like breaking bricks, I'll create licks. I'll pound my fist to break out of this trance I'm in, and it's opening. I'm in a spell and I can't help but lose myself. I'm in a spell and I can't help but lose myself. Does the story have an end? Well, I can't tell, cause it's happening. It's going on and I'm going strong, and I don't mind if the road is long. I'm in a spell and I can't help but lose myself.
How are we going to decide on a meaning of something? If reality doesn't determine the meaning, and we each have our own truths, well then what's the only possibility? If we're going to decide on a meaning, then either I have to make you yield to my meaning, or you have to make me yield to your meaning. There's no arbiter that stands outside of both of us, to which we both have to submit. Either I submit to you, or you submit to me. And there's no way out. There's no way out of that. I think that's why Sartre, in a play entitled No Exit, No Way Out, ends with the famous statement that hell is other people. And if we're all defining our own reality, if truth is relative to each of us, well then, what do we do when we confront the other? We have to make that other yield to our vision of truth, to our vision of reality. But the other's going to do the same to us. And so we're going to be locked in this conflict with the other. Whose vision will win? Whose vision will prevail? to have true communion unless you can have a common language. And the only source of that common language is going to be a common reality that you share, not as God of that reality, but as a receiver of that reality. Both equally, as I said before, both equally subject to reality. Not each creating our own reality, but equally sharing in that which is given to us.
And evil is the destruction of freedom. This is the TheEnd Evil Podcast. I have a special treat for you this week. I'm revisiting one of the first presentations I ever did. And the topic is more crucial and important than it ever was in this day and age and where we're at right now. Dealing with the mind control spell that's going on around us, where people seem to get hooked into every narrative and story, whether it be religion, whether it be a story from childhood, a story from their parents, a story from their politicians, or a story from their neighbor. People are so eager to believe stories, and yet what we're here encouraging in the natural law and freedom community is to look at things for what they are in the real world and separate from the non-reality, which is all around us, so-called new normal. And I hate to be rude, but there's a lot of stupid out there. And those of us who are paying attention right now are not in the stupid category, because we're thinking about things and we're wondering about how to make a difference. And that really comes down to the biggest question of all, which is the question of why. Why are so many people blind to what's happening around them in the world and so quick to trust politicians and various rulers to guide them? And this brings me to an important point about the Hermetic principles. If you haven't read or studied the Kybalion, I highly recommend. This is a absolute fundamental piece of knowledge as we look deeply into the aspects of reality that are principles, things that don't change, things that are always the same. When you keep asking the why question, you keep coming back with there are solid absolutes in this reality. There is a such thing as truth, like the clip we listened to in the beginning of this presentation. The gentleman reminds us that we can't all have our own truths, otherwise there would be no communication and there would be nothing. There would be no science, that's one thing for sure. Science is based on, in its purest sense, doing repeated experiments and getting the same results. How could we have equipment and electronics and technology to perform the same tasks over and over if everything about reality was totally unpredictable? And that's the type of world some people think we live in when they're imagining that we could all just believe what we want, where belief is not really a destination. Belief is a way to work our way towards the solid ground of principles. And the principle of polarity says that everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet, all truths are but half-truths, and all paradoxes must be reconciled. Now, this has paradox in this statement. There's two different things that are saying they're completely different, but they're also the same. And we live in a world where there is gray areas and gradients. And, we got on and off switch, and then we got the slider adjustments where you can have part way on and part way off. And so I think we live in a world where there's so many options and we see so many perspectives that people tend to think that, well, how could you possibly ever know anything for real? How could anything be true? But polarity is true. There is hot and cold. There is up and down. There is left and right. And if you walk off the edge of a cliff, you do fall, unless you're wearing a parachute, and then you fall slower, like I was saying, gradients. And so all paradoxes may be reconciled. That means that even though things are seemingly the same and opposite sometimes, there is a way to explain this and understand that. And I think it has everything to do with perspective. And that's how we look at things. And if we allow our minds to be trapped in certain ways of looking at things, we lose the ability to zoom out and see things from perspective. Sometimes things make sense when you're really close to them. And then when you back away, you see a whole nother picture, you see a whole nother landscape, and then that gives you more context. And context is what we're largely missing in our logical thinking and common sense conclusions in our society. So I've had some interesting synchronicities recently with the Fool card. It's funny how it comes up at amazing times. But I think it's a great card in the tarot because it reminds us that, everything has two sides, right? The good aspects of being kind of like the Fool on the Fool card is beginning new things and having that freedom and innocence and original type of thinking and adventurism, idealism. It's like the childlike part of us that can be spontaneous and jump from rock to rock. Now, we have to be careful with that part of ourselves, because if it gets reckless or careless or distracted, we can get hurt. We can hurt others around us. We can become fools. We can be gullible. We can, get dull, from just doing that same thing, always looking for a new beginning, a new thing, kind of like people that follow the news, always looking for something new, when really reality is pretty much the same old thing. It's the cumulative results of the things we did leading up to this moment, and now we're experiencing the natural law results and consequences of our aggregate cumulative behavior. And so in order to solve the overwhelming problems, we're going to need to have this sort of freedom of innocence and originality, and be willing to try things we maybe haven't tried before. Because obviously the things humans have tried over and over throughout history keep leading to similar problems. So, there's no solution in politics or government, or taxing one another or stealing from one another or forcing others to do things, because those always lead to more suffering and more trouble for everyone. So, to open these doors to the mind, how do we talk to other people about these things? As you can see, I'm experimenting with sharing my art with you in the form of my singing even. And recently on a presentation, I made a rap, and these are ways that humans can relate to others. These are ways you can relate to other human beings, to share deeper ideas, to help them. We need everyone's help to see that the problem around us is grandiose. Huxley said in A Brave New World, one believes things because one has been conditioned to believe them. One of the biggest aspects of our reality and our society right now is coming to realizations and just recognizing things for what they are. It's up to each of us to educate our fellow human being. And right now we have an amazing ability to do that with technology. Even though there's the shadow banning and there's the censorship, still manage to reaching people on a larger scale than I would be able to by yelling from the rooftop. Because it can multiply and basically infinitely grow if things are published in the right places. And so I need your help, folks who are listening, to share the work that I'm creating. And I'm encouraging you to do the same. Find a way to share information about deeper truths, about morality, about principles, so that we can help end evil in the world and stop stealing from one another in various ways. Your energy will flow where your attention goes. If you're going through periods of time of sadness and depression and being upset about things, there's a tendency to cyclically think about these things and keep going back to them. Whereas if our attention is working towards a greater ideal, ending evil, for instance, working towards truth, fighting for freedom, fighting for children, fighting for rights, people that have had their children taken away from them, these type of things, we find a higher meaning, a higher purpose, and we find that our actions contribute towards a better future. And psychologically and subconsciously, we know when we're making choices that are good, and we sleep better. And if you want to feel like a good human being, put your attention and energy into something worthwhile. of the future that you could look back on when you were old and say, oh, I did some amazing things. I created presentations and that changed people's minds. I wrote books that opened people's minds. I paved the way to a better future for my grandchildren. Ignorance is evil. When there's an opportunity to know what's correct and what's right and how you can help people, you're actually lying by not paying attention to that. Nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. That's Martin Luther King Jr. Never in history has so much information been available. I do recognize that it's hidden under heaps of bullshit that's not true, but it's out there. And, it's up to us to find the things, the golden nuggets, the principles, the things that survive through all this time. We have thousands of years of people's writings and wisdom and poetry in books, in movies, and it's up to us to discern what are the best aspects of that and pass those on to our next generation, because we're lacking the structure that many cultures had in the past of cohesive communication, of storytelling to the young, of creating ethics. Even ethics is when a group or even a person decides, like, here's the morals we really want to work towards here that's most important in the context of the way we're living here. And so a code of ethics is missing. It's not something they talk about in school. Why not? It's not something they talk about in politics. Why not? It's because our whole society is based on Satanism, which is ignorance. It's choosing to be a slave. It's choosing to be hypnotized. It's allowing yourself to go along with the sheep, to go along with what you know is wrong. The bankers stealing from people, the children being trafficked, the adults turning a blind eye, and continuing all the cycles of our society to get ahead and feel good about yourself and, look, drive beautiful, have nice things. Hypnosis, which also referred to as hypnotherapy or hypnotic suggestion, is a trance-like state. It's not always a negative thing to use hypnosis. It can be used to self-hypnotize. With the help of a therapist, using verbal repetition and mental images, when you're under hypnosis, you can, feel calm and relaxed, and you can be more open to suggestions. People use it to look back in life and find times when they're having trouble looking at because of their trauma. Hypnosis can be used to help you gain control over undesired behaviors or cope better with anxiety or pain. So although it can be used in these positive methodologies, hypnosis is also used in the negative sense constantly all around us. And it happens in the form of repetition, and happens in the form of manipulating your emotions to get you to be a good consumer and buy things. Excuse me. So we have to recognize that our day-to-day life becomes a hypnosis. We get pulled into doing the same things over and over and saying the same words over and over. Thank God it's Friday. Oh, it's hump day, Wednesday, whatever, people say at work, oh, it's just another day. And we speak into existence the reality that we want to live. We're creating somnambulistic, zombie-like human beings all around the world. And it's evident that we're still going along with the wants and needs of some of the most evil people in the world. And most people know about this and aren't taking any action at all. And I don't suggest you should go out there and take some sort of wild, polarized, reactionary action. I suggest we need to educate ourselves into the problem and recognize that our day-to-day life needs to have aspects of it that are working towards the solution. And the more of our day and time we can spend working towards a positive solution for more than just ourselves, the more we're going to feel good about ourselves and have a sense of meaning. And so that's abracadabra, speaking into existence. Hebrew words ab, ben, and ruk, hakodesh, Holy Spirit, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, meaning it will be created in my words. So biblical, different religions offer versions of this Trinity, of this threefold triangle shape, which is, the ability to put things together is all based on Pythagoras, looking back at the Pythagoreans, some of the amazing people in history, my whole trade in life, doing carpentry, is based on the ability to understand triangles. And understanding words is like understanding triangles in building. Words are the way we build our future with one another. It's the way we converse. It's the way we communicate. And so the way we communicate with ourselves is every bit as important as the way we communicate with people around us. And one will reflect the other. So we have to be meaningful with our words, and we have to think about them. And one great way to do that, practice speaking your words, is to come on the TheEnd Evil Podcast on a live roundtable and speak your mind on one of the many topics that we do every month. Or create your own podcast or show. Or speak to people in your neighborhood or in your family when you have an opportunity. But the more you're able to do it in an organized manner and make a good point without getting emotional, the better people are going to listen to you. People are very eager to follow leaders. It's just been shown over and over. Now, is this because of years and years of indoctrination? Is this because of a weak part of our anatomy? Or is this because of some ancient traumas done in history and traumas done ever since, which I tend to think is the case? We don't know exactly, but we do know, based on things like the Milgram experiment, that people obey authority. And that is one of the main problems in the world. And it has to do with, like I was talking about, anybody who's going to tell you a good story, you're going to believe it because they are an authority. Whereas we need to learn to think for things for ourselves and re-educate ourselves with what really makes sense. And the more people that we communicate with and the more places we go and see, the more we don't have to be making our decision because a doctor told us to push the button, which is what happened in the Milgram experiment. You had people basically electrocuting other human beings in their mind. That's what they thought was happening. In truth, luckily, they were not. But they were willing to do it if a doctor told them to, is what it comes down to. Almost every single one was willing to electrocute another human being to death because they were told to do so. And there's been other experiments that have confirmed this same dynamic. So are you the type of person? Would you walk by while a child was being abused or a woman was being killed and not do anything about it? Well, you need to get your mind right if that is the case, because that's the problem in the world, is people aren't taking responsibility. And Rose, if you haven't seen his new movie, The Jones Plantation, you need to get out there and check out that movie. It's one of the best movies ever, and share it with your friends, because it really shows us how, people are fooled by these things. People, even if they come to see corruption, they still want to believe in a system of coercion to solve the problem for them. Until we understand what a right is, until we understand where rights come from, until we understand that we own our own body and that we have a responsibility to protect those rights, each and every one of us, how can we have freedom? How can we have freedom if we don't know what it is? Is a right something that's granted to you by an angel or a piece of paper or a dinosaur? No. It's just, we have to really just think about it. It should be so basic. This should be like page 1 of our first day of learning is about rights. And then maybe page 2, day 2 could be how to defend those rights. How to defend those rights with your body. How to defend them with sticks. How to defend them with knives. How to defend it with guns. And when we understand how to defend our right to make our own choices, and that will help us understand that everyone else has that right as well. And with that level of empathy and understanding, it's going to be so much harder for anyone to trample on those rights when you have a whole population of people that understand that no one should have any rights over another without their permission. And that's what we have right now is a system that doesn't ask your permission. It tells you if you don't like it, move away. And there's nowhere to move that's better, I guarantee that. Mind control is a lot more subtle than most people think it is. People like to think of mind control as the Vulcan mind meld, like this kind of like really spooky thing where you lose complete control and somebody's like controlling you like you'd control a remote control car. But the real reality of mind control is coercion. It's feeling persuaded to do something you would otherwise not do. Like having to pay 30 to 50% of everything you get to the government, and then have them tax you and pull you over and extort you for using the road that was used to pay from your own hard work labor. Or, for instance, going downtown, most cities, they want to tax you to park your car in the downtown that was built with your money that you earned. It should be your downtown, and it should be your parking spot. Because the whole idea is that, communities are all chipping in, so there's enough for everyone. And yet, there's never any money left over to take care of the homeless. And we have situations where there's corruption in politics, and these super wealthy people are trying to make us feel bad for using our carbon credits. The reality of real mind control is mob rule. It's the gang mentality that's exactly what we're experiencing now. And I'm not saying it wouldn't be bad if we had just a bunch of violent gangs around. That would be difficult. But at least they might keep each other in check to some extent. Whereas right now we have an unchecked gang that owns the entire planet, basically. And, this semblance of borders and one country fighting another is mostly a show to keep you believing, to keep you in this spell. And if you're in that spell and you still think that, it's just, there's different leaders of these different countries that have different, voted in rights, and they just want to do it that way, you're not looking at the big picture. You're not reading the books. You're not looking deeper enough to see that that's not what's going on. There are families that have been ruling this planet for generations with their vast resources of money and power, and using very occulted mind control techniques, all which have to do with manipulating your emotions and keeping you divided as a public. And we've broken them down in many ways here on the One Great Work Network, and on Mark Passio's One Great Work Network, and on whatonearthishappening.com. Will Tell Truth, or willkeller.com is a new one I want to tell people about. Will's opened his website. But there's many truth and freedom people out there trying to explain this dynamic. And it's still not getting through to enough of the public. So we need your help to kind of help make sense of this. Pictures like this, I think help explain what we're talking about. The threat of violence, like we saw, when they called people still call them the riots. I don't think there were really very many riots. I think mostly those were staged for TV, what we saw on TV. There was, but definitely all these situations where armed police with all their gear on are basically beating up on, citizens that were trapped in their house for months because of the fake scamdemic. And, this supposed beating of this, one person starts these whole, what they called riots, which weren't really, it was people protesting. There were certain people that got out of control, like any mob. But the real mob was the people that worked for the government, the soldiers that came in and marched over homeless people, and they do that every week in most cities, kicking homeless people out of downtown because they want it to be prettier. When that money that they took from everyone to pay for their paychecks and their fancy gear should be taking care of people and everyday people, right? If we were doing things in their stupid collectivist plan, which isn't a good idea anyway. What we want to do is, instead of trying to tell a man to fish, we want to teach a man to fish, and a woman and a child too. Show them how to get things. Show them the right way to do things. Don't tell them what not to do. We show them how to build things, how to create things, how to protect yourself. And when we educate and teach one another, and we create strong communities and integral defense systems within those communities, how would we be so easily corrupted when these people clearly used government, like during the big scam? It was so obvious with all their mandates and bullshit rules that came out everywhere all at once, like posters that had already been created, and were all ready to tell you you're supposed to be 3 feet or 6 feet or 12 feet apart, and this whole thing was if you even took any time to see James Corbett, another good truth speaker, Corbett Report, he pointed this stuff out before it even happened. They were having these meetings that weren't even secret out in the public of practicing how we were going to deal with the public when we roll out our scamdemic. And of course, they didn't call that at the time, but they might as well have. Event 21, I believe it was. And then look what they're doing. They're trying to own your health. They're creating a new religion, is basically what's been done, to scare people into submission. If you don't use our special thing, our special medication, then, and now it's so obvious that they're just straight up killing people that you have to really have your eyes closed and ears closed and everything to not see what's so obviously going around, that, they're selling these drugs to kill people, and not all at once. They don't want to kill everybody at once. They want to kill just enough people so they can control the rest, is what it feels like, and that's the trend, right? And doesn't that make the sense? If you were someone who didn't care and didn't have empathy and were a psychopath, well, why do we have psychopaths in the world? Well, partly because people are being raised on crap food and a crap education. The Prussian education system, look at John Taylor Gatto's work, and our whole education system is based on the same system that trained the Nazis and, set the path for all that warfare that happened during the period of time of World War II. Millions of people dying, 500,000 people dying in one day with bombs. All brought about by training people to stand in lines, wear uniforms, and pray to the black Saturnian square of graduation to get your diploma, right? Which a lot of these words, when you look into the words that are used in school and politics, you're going to find out that a lot of these words, their derivation, are actually having to do with religion. And religion and government, there's really no difference. And modern medical system has become a religion too. People want to read a headline and say, oh, I heard about this. Like, you already know something just because some authoritarian said it. These are dogmatic ways of thinking and religious systems that need to be abolished from our mind and scraped from our way of thinking completely. We need to keep asking why until we really understand. And if we can't, we get help. We talk to other human beings, and we help educate one another. I'm seeing more of this going on in the alternative media. But it's important that we get past the talking points of the Reuters or whatever they are, and the NBC and these big names, what they're talking about, and we start talking about what needs to be talked about. Things like, how do we build our communities? How do we grow food? How do we stop these planes that are flying over us and who knows what they're doing? We need to know what's going on in our skies, because we're having fires, we're having earthquakes, we're having all these terrible things happen in different places that are suspicious on multiple levels. So that means the people, the communities need to band together and demand that, their skies are kept clean, that their area is taken care of, and that they aren't taxed. And no one does try to coerce them. And we can do this if we work together. We're going to have to a level, to get any of these things done. And otherwise, we're constantly going to be owned by technology, because that's the way things are going. We can all see AIs growing at leaps and bounds, and it's way ahead of us as fast as we can keep up with it. There's constant distractions, and that's keeping people from being able to stop and literally just think about things. It's said that many writers that we read from a couple hundred years ago, before radios and TV, could remember entire volumes of books in their head. And our capacity for being able to think and use the trivium and process and use our rhetoric and speak to other people has been lost. It's an art form that we can really work on getting better at. And that is our process here. When those of us that are creating podcasts, it takes a lot of work, and it forces you to go through these. Understand, what words am I using? What am I trying to say to these people? This is very important things. You need to break your mind spell, folks, because they are putting a mind spell on you, whether it's the CIA or the occult leadership of various secret societies, politicians, commercial interests. It doesn't really matter who all it is, but they're doing it. There's a lot of them out there doing it. propaganda is all around you. Operation Mockingbird was a fully implemented CIA program to spread disinformation throughout American media. And CIA Director William Kobe testified to the Church Committee that over 400 CIA agents were active in the U.S. media to control what was reported through American mainstream television, newspapers, and magazines. So that's probably a tiny percent of what's happening today. I mean, anybody that tries to speak about something important, especially in the last couple of years, has seen their channels taken down. And we see how all these networks are tied together and working in unison. It's because they're owned by the same people, folks. And this is more than just owning businesses and corporations. This is owning your mind. This is owning how you think. This is owning the belief systems, printing the books that become the Bibles and the the pamphlets, and the next liberal movement or whatever they're going to create is coming from think tanks. And these hot words they come out with, these are part of the Tesseract. This is something I talked about in a presentation called A Trap Within a Trap. You can find my work. Look me up, TheEndEvil.life, and you'll see I've done quite a bit of other discussions on these factors. And you can use anything I've created to help share with others and convince others and explain to them, like I'm explaining to you, what these clear problems are so we can fix them, because it's really that easy. We got to recognize the problem for what it is. We need to discuss back and forth what are the best tactics we can do to move forward, and then we work together and put out solutions. And there's plenty of us, and there's plenty of resources on this planet, and there's plenty of information. All we need is the willpower and the human beings to get this job done. So thanks for checking out my presentation this week, and I hope it inspires you to do something on your own, and I appreciate your time and attention. Thanks.
What makes somebody a slave is when your choices are being owned or controlled, or even in our case, you're doing things under coercion. And the type of slavery that's most recognizable and noticeable in our modern society is coming in the form of money, debt slavery, and making us choose things because we're not going to be able to survive if we don't play this game with the money.
It's like the truth is beyond all evil. Evil is an illusion. By its nature, anything man-made is just an illusion, something taken out of nature. It's a temporary material thing, and if we recognize the higher truth beyond it, we can keep that material thing. But if we attach our worldview to the material thing, to the man-made thing, assume that to be our reality, now we forget about nature, the bigger truth that is beyond.
I came up with this word in some of my reading called somnambulistic. And what that is like sleepwalking. It's like living life, but you're not actually awake and aware. And I think what's really interesting thing about that Lego movie is it's like the head character, he's kind of this dumbass, and he's kind of bungling his way through, what am I supposed to do? And, like the wise guy saying, like, you got to actually think of something that nobody thought of before. They're actually telling him he has to use creativity, and that's what he has to do. He has to learn how to use the Legos, like make a circle into a wheel, and that saves their life or whatever. It's just like using a little bit of imagination and creativity to kind of think around the problem. Every time I bring up these issues with people, like they get it on a certain level, like the taxes is stealing, like they're like, yeah, I get what you're saying, but because they can't see from here to the finish line, and it seems like scary or unrealistic to go from where we're at now to a world where we're all self-responsible, then it can't happen because I can't imagine it. Therefore, well, let's just go with the shitty program we got now of cheating and stealing and raping one another. But back to the Lego movie, the point I really want to make about that, and it's the same point I made in my presentation, is imagination, having the ability to create and imagine. It has a lot to do with creation itself. And like people that are somnambulistic, that are asleep, they must not get that there's a God, that there is a master builder, that there is intelligence, mentalism, like you talked about. The universe is intelligent. And this is an amazing, fantastic, mind-blowing experience we're having here. that we get an opportunity to live and be part of this amazing experience of creation. And how real is that? And how amazing is that? Why the fuck would you sleep through that? You know, there's work to be done. And that's if you're tuned in and if you've done the work enough to where your brain's not constantly distracted by all the little bullshit in Lego world, and you can actually focus for long enough to listen to the voice inside of you, it's going to tell you, do something good. Do something that shows you care, you know, and true care is always going to be a level of hard work or frustration or pain, but it doesn't have to be suffering, because we're not choosing just to, you know, like we talked about before, just to go through all the terrible bad things, just to go through the terrible bad things.
Knowing yourself, you know, that's one of the key things. You know, it is we have to know ourselves, because hell, again, when we do things that we really don't want to do, our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions are not in sync.
Like, you don't even realize, like, since, you know, it's part of the programming. Like, say you want to drive, then it's like, oh, I got to get a license. I don't want to get a license, but then you're like, all right, I guess I gotta agree with them, and they get what they want. I get what I want, so I can drive, you know. And if I don't drive the way they want me to, then, so it's all about like, you know, being controlled, and, you know, that lack of freedom.
Are the hospitals not compromised? Is education not compromised? Is the military politics? Like, what institution is not compromised?
Uncompromised by Ron Renard. The most fulfilled and effective people know what they stand for. They know why, and they live accordingly. And when they fall, they recover back to themselves post-haste. Living uncompromised is about recognizing that moment by moment, you're making decisions that either establish you as a consistent man or woman of your word, or as a poser who looks good but isn't living what you profess.
Spirit, man, that's integrated the elements that we're all comprised of. And if we're compromised of that, then we're not fully operating at our full potential, unfortunately.
Integrity is something I don't think anyone should be compromising on. Principles is definitely one that people shouldn't be compromising on and do. Truth is a major one that people are compromising on.
A lot of people's spiritual currency is being compromised, being their time, energy, and focus. And you can just tell by their body language that they would rather be elsewhere.
You know, to go along, to get along, to go with the flow of what other people are doing. You don't want to make waves.
Right, shields have been compromised, right? It reminds me of a horse, you know, like when a horse is broken, you know, that's kind of, to me, the parallel for us as humans. When we're living our life out in public and we're broken like a horse, we've been compromised, are based on natural law principles. And so the closer we can get to those principles being what carry us in our decision-making process, rather than a belief system, the more we can be rooted in truth and be in alignment with that.
Compromising devalues your self-worth, and it devalues, you know, your true value in and of itself, because you are lowering your standards. You know, you are lowering your value by saying, hey, I'm just going to do what everyone else is doing. Hey, I'm just going to be average.
And the more we can be uncompromising of those most important things, the better and the quicker we'll see the world that we want to see. So be inspired, be motivated, folks.
ultimately, it's up to you.